Hello darlings and welcome. Today I am joined by Asit Patel, a kind and thoughtful man in a world that's not always so kind and thoughtful to men. We've seen a general lack of empathy towards men and the issues they face in our modern world. And this in turn creates a sort of void where bad actors can then come in and acknowledge the truth that others shy away from, and gain dedicated followings because of it. But I want to push back against this. I want to make more honest and genuine conversations about this more commonplace, based less on conjecture and finger-pointing and negative narratives surrounding men, and more on scientific data and what we actually see play out in our society. To this end, a lot of the research I discussed is cited in the video itself, so you can get a feel for some of the evidence behind the points I'm making. So join us as we defend the indefensible. Maybe the best way to start would just be to tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, my full name is Asit Patel. I live here with my family. We are an immigrant family in Canada. We came here when I was in high school, which is about at this point, 8 years ago. I was in grade 9. Before moving to Canada, my family used to live in the western part of India in a state called Gujarat. And I grew up in the same city for my entire life. I did all my schooling there up until I guess. In India, there's no concept of junior high and middle school and stuff like that. So up until grade 9, I did my schooling there, moved here with my family. And yeah, I've had the opportunity to work here, experience all the school life, experience all the workplace settings and everything. So I'm pretty well versed, and I like to think that I'm fairly assimilated to the culture, and I love being here.
So the main thing I wanted to talk about today was men's issues, because I did a previous episode about women's issues, so I wanted to get a kind of sister episode to that. And so I'm going to ask you what you think the main issues facing men today are. But first, I want to discuss a little bit about why it's so important to talk about this, because I think a lot of times men's issues are kind of pushed to the side. I think nowadays, but even historically, men have been kind of seen more as expendable. And so a lot of their issues are kind of thrown to the side, or it's a lot of times it's just more of pick yourself up by your bootstraps, just not really trying to help men, just more do whatever yourself. Especially now with the modern, a lot of modern culture, more of almost hatred towards men. I think in a lot of the modern rhetoric, especially from the far left. And so what that's left is a kind of void where no one's willing to actually talk about a lot of the real issues or some of the science behind a couple of the things going on. And when you have that void and no one of any legitimacy is willing to talk about it, you open up a vacuum that other people can come in and fill that are less reputable. And so that's where you get the Andrew Tates or the Fresh and Fits of the world, who can kind of come in and initially base their arguments and stuff on things that are true. A lot of the initial stuff he says, at the very ground level, is based in reality and stuff. But then you can take that step after step, and because he's the only one saying anything, he can take that as far as he wants. And since he's the only one actually acknowledging the initial thing, people still follow him, despite being someone who's obviously a terrible person and has a program literally called Hustlers University. In any normal world, that the most get rich quick terrible scheme, you'd immediately dismiss him if you're not someone of any legitimacy. But because we have this situation where no one else is willing to talk about these things, these people can get into it. So that's I think a big reason why these need to be discussed a little bit more, is that without it, the only people doing it are the worst people.
It definitely, I agree with that, because when you push the spring too hard on one side, it bounces back just as hard on the other side. I've also gotten my fair share of Andrew Tate recommendations on my YouTube, so I know what you're talking about. Because at first it starts out, you're okay, yeah, maybe in this 10-second clip he makes sense. You move on and it goes way off, and I'm okay, yeah, maybe he should step back a little bit. But yeah, there are bits and pieces that I definitely agree with, some of these people. And I guess, to get this, right off the bat, I don't want to align myself on any of the sides, right? I look at everything, really objectively. And also, I approach everything with a value-based approach, or I guess how much it benefits us as a humanity, us as a society, individual people, stuff like that. Yeah. So one thing I've noticed is when you go onto either side on these extremist things, where when you start listening to these Andrew Tate kinds of recommendations, that also, I guess, gets into the territory where it kind of harms people, or harms society, or harms the person, or I guess your worldviews for because he always talks about women in a certain way, right? Definitely that shouldn't be the predominant I guess, opinion for them, or at least we shouldn't be viewing women that way. And same on the other side, like nobody should be viewing men as like, these spiteful people. We have enough hatred going on, and we have enough divide as it is with like all our nationalities, religion, and all the other things. We don't need another gender situation going on in this.
Yeah,
So I definitely agree with that.
that's very fair. So what do you think that what do you in your opinion are the main issues you feel like are facing men?
I'm not fully sure. Okay, so I have been following a few things, but overarchingly, what I want to say is definitely in the modern, I guess for the lack of a better word, the movement, I guess, whatever this new wave feminist movement is, there is a big, yeah, there is a big opinion that men are malicious. There's a yeah I'm losing words, but basically the view that men are malicious or the patriarchy is up men are upkeeping the patriarchy because they want to have the power and stuff like that. All of that, I definitely feel like it's a really easy way to just like put that statement and be done with the issues, like your hands are clean, like, hey, men are the issue, and hey, that's done.
Yeah, you don't have to look into any of the actual like details of
Exactly.
anything. You have a nice big like these are the bad guys, and now I don't have to. I'm not responsible for any more like actually nuance of any situations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely agree with you because everything that you said, even at the before, because there is this expectation of for men to be like strong, not to be like sharing their emotions. When you do end up sharing your emotions, again, like it can get way too far on the other side, where like you have these men that are like sharing way too much, and then again, society kind of judges them for that. So I guess having this healthy balance and yeah, like overarching all the issues. I don't exactly have an answer for that, but like if I look at something and I can easily evaluate it based on like whatever factors I can like think of.
Well, then I think what I want to get into first is more of like the relationship side, because I feel like there's two big areas of like success and like happiness and like achievement in life. There's like economic success of like having a successful career, like becoming a CEO, starting a company, all of that kind of stuff. And then there's like relationship success of like having a family, having intimate connections with people and stuff. And I feel like both of those are like almost equally important. I think maybe even the family one is a little bit more so, though I think we focus in our society a lot more on the economic one just because it's a lot more measurable. If you can be like, oh, you have this much money in your bank account, you make this much, and like
Yeah.
happiness with like family and stuff is like how happy does your like significant other or your children make you? And it's like, I don't know, it's a vague concept. So I think I want to go to the relationship part first, though, because I think that kind of it builds up to the economic portion. So the first thing I think that underlies everything is what do like men and women want in partners, and we see a couple things in the research and a couple differences. So one of the biggest ones is that generally women select for like socioeconomic status. So that's like wealth and like influence and power and stuff. They generally date up and across socioeconomic hierarchies and almost never date down. Or will men, by consequence, do the opposite, right? They always date down and across socioeconomic hierarchies. They also select for some things like, obviously, height is one that they select for somewhat heavily. Intelligence, somewhat mediated by like educational achievement. So it's that one's a little bit blurry because like how much is just straight intelligence and how much is educational achievement, which then achieves economically and stuff, because it's all kind of intertwined. But there does seem to be some amount of just pure like how smart are people. And also things like kindness and generosity, specifically towards the woman. A little bit less so in general. And then for men on the other side, it's a lot more physical appearance. Men care a lot more comparatively to women about like physical features. They also, for long-term relationships, generally value low promiscuity and like faithfulness in relationships a lot more. However, that's only for long-term relationships. So an important thing to note that a lot of people gonna get confused here is relationship like mating strategies, because women generally have one kind of coherent mating strategy of like trying to find someone who is like a good partner who can like provide for them and who they find desirable. And it's kind of an all long-term mating strategy. And you can think of it logically, evolutionarily, because birth control hasn't been around for very long. So most historical events of people getting partnered together, like if the woman's choosing someone, regardless if it's short or long, she can still get pregnant. So the cost is still there for her. So like obviously she's going to select more for the things that are more long term and stuff, because short term is the same as long term, except that maybe you don't have someone to also help with whatever child, especially in like a more primitive society where that's a little bit more important for providing stuff. However, men, on the other hand, have kind of like two separate strategies that have been seen in the data. Men have a kind of short-term mating strategy where they have a lot lower standards. So men will like engage with and sleep with women far below what they would like usually commit to. And they actually, for short-term relationships, they value promiscuity a bit. They like promiscuity, whereas for long-term they don't. And so that's just the kind of base layout of what kind of people are, like, evolutionarily, biologically looking for. David Buss does a lot of great research here. So if anyone's, like, interested in that, I believe in 2019 he did a review of a lot of the scientific literature. He did a nice review of a lot of his research and a lot of other researchers, just going through a lot of these points and a lot of other ones and just showing all the research for it. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this, I would highly recommend looking up that. But yeah, so do you have any questions on that, first of all?
Not questions, but like even I definitely agree because like the short term and long term, even with my personal, I guess thought processes and observations, I've noticed that this is definitely a thing. Even in the short term, I guess I'd like to add the not just the promiscuity factor, but also like the people's preferences, like men's preferences for like women's physical features and stuff. That's much more heightened for like short term relationships compared to long term. Because like in long term, I guess at least I would say in my I value their personality, their values, their ethics more than their physical features. Because physical features, 20 years down the line, you probably won't be just as young, but like your values will still be there. So stuff like that also, yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. And like I was mainly talking about like differences in their things as well. That's an important thing to just note is that there's similar things like having similar interests and stuff is a very big one that like both parties kind of want and rely on and can help make good relationships and stuff. And also these don't necessarily make good relationships. These are just the things that people are evolved to like. Selecting for them probably won't actually help, especially for things like physical appearance or things like height. It just doesn't actually do very much in the long term. Let's see. So we have these kind of differences. I guess one thing to just note here is that I think a lot of times the male side of these differences is kind of looked at more harshly. I guess like men being less interested in women who are physically unattractive or with like high body counts and stuff is, I think, generally in our culture, the way we're going, at least here in like the West and Canada and the US and stuff, looked at like a lot more negatively than women selecting for like wealthy or tall or intelligent partners, right? It's viewed as worse despite it being, I don't know, the other dynamic of the relationship.
I guess a few things I do remember like hearing about this is the reason society really uplifts men. To be fair, like they shouldn't, but the reason they uplift men is because like for men to get many partners is very difficult compared to women getting the many partners. It's definitely not like consistent in all cases, but in generally it is kind of true, right?
Yes.
So that's why in general, I guess when you see another man, you call them studs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I see where you're going with this. So it's why like women might be like slut shamed or something, but men aren't, right? They're never. That is just a difference of what's hard and easy. It's very hard for like men to get partners, so getting partners is considered desirable, and you also have to be a desirable person to do that. So like that's considered valuable, but for women it isn't, so it's not as valued as much. It's the same way you might praise someone who like goes for a 10-mile run compared to someone who sat on the couch and ate potato chips, despite them both doing things, is because one of them was a lot harder, required a lot more effort, and is a lot more like accomplishing something while the other isn't.
But yeah, definitely the part where, because I think it's just a modern phenomenon where the freedom movement, or I guess the freedom to have to go to parties and like dress however they want. Like sure, you can do that, but then you also have to respect your partner's like values and stuff. If the man also does that and then he expects his partner to doesn't do it or he doesn't expects his woman not to do it, then that's hypocrisy. Like we should completely shut down hypocrisy at the root. But if the man itself, himself is generally virtuous and he doesn't, practice all of these things, and the woman wants to do it, then it's the man's choice. Like if he doesn't want to do, date you, he can't. It's his choice. Just like how women can like do the same. They're like, hey, this guy's poor or this guy's not rich. Because like, I guess this goes back to the thing where like the value is different for men and women. For women, again, as you said, it's like the value of a man is socioeconomic status. And for the man, the value for a woman is to a certain extent like virtue, ethics, purity, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
So I think I kind of get what you mentioned. Because, yeah, sometimes like men are like, no, I guess it's just going back to like the demonizing thing, right? Of men saying, no, I don't want a partner who's like going to be sleeping around with a bunch of people is kind of seen as like a negative thing. But a woman who says like, no, I'm not gonna be dating a partner who's like living in his parents' basement and like not doing anything in life, is seen as a very reasonable and like positive thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think both of them are very reasonable and like generally are like equally valid. But yeah, so that's just the mate preference part. So then we get into like what's actually happening with like people getting together and stuff. And I think we touched on it a little bit, but generally what the trends look like is that things aren't going as well for men. There's a lot of times there's the statistic quoted that like I think it was like 30% of men haven't had sex in like the last year, where the number was like around 19.1% for women. And the numbers seem to be increasing, and the disparity seemed to be increasing. That was, of course, before COVID, and COVID obviously kind of threw that for a whole loop. Because there's tons of cool differences between men and women. And one of them is like disgust sensitivity and stuff, right? Women are much more disgust sensitive. Men are much more risk taking as a reverse to that we'll get into a little bit later. I haven't seen actual like scientific data, but I've seen some charts of people claiming to have it, and it looks like it would do what you'd think. It reverses for a little bit, where like men have slightly more sex since it's COVID and people are locked down, and so the people taking risks and not worrying about getting sick happen to be all the men, of course. They're the ones going out and trying to get. And then right after lockdowns, it goes up for everyone, which also makes sense because now everyone isn't trapped and stuff. So we'll have to wait and see how things continue to go, if they go back to the previous trends of all the years before, or if something new happens. But that's what we had so far. We also have like around like 18 to 29, the rates of like single men are almost double that of women. So we can see that generally men aren't doing as good as women, especially younger men, which is generally where all these conversations are surrounded around, right? And things don't look to be getting better, especially with like dating apps and stuff. I think that technology has done has been very harmful to actually like legitimate relationships, right? For a number of reasons. Part of it I think is just obviously dating apps they have a profit incentive to not actually make good relationships and stuff. Obviously the actual apps themselves, because if you get relationships then they leave your app and stop paying you. So that's not a profitable business model, right? Obviously. So it's in a kind of convoluted sense, they really want to keep people single and desperate to get relationships. But I think broader than that though is with the broadening possibilities of being able to see everyone else. What's happened is a couple things. So there's a neat scientific thing that's been replicated a lot in business for people trying to sell things for like business companies, because companies want to maximize profits and stuff. And what some of these studies have found is that increased options actually makes people less happy. So a very the stereotypical one of this is jams at a grocery store. I don't know if you've heard this one before, but like if you have like 3 types of like jelly or jam at a grocery store, you might pick one, say the strawberry one, and be like, okay, I have the strawberry one. Fairly happy with my choice. That's all good. If you increase it to like have 20 different options, you have strawberry and you have raspberry and you have like orange marmalade and a ton of different options. Initially people say, yes, I love this. I have so many more options. I could pick exactly what I want. But once they actually make a choice, and then you go after and you say, hey, how happy are you with that choice? They're across the board less happy with it. They're more dissatisfied. They're not happy with the choice they've made as much.
What's
because
the
they have
reason?
all these. Sorry. Yeah.
Did they want to try the other options? Is that why they're generally unhappy?
Kind of. It's not. It's less that they. Kind of maybe. It's not that they wanted. It's like I chose this, but maybe there was a better one. Like, man, this is good, but like,
okay.
What if that other one was better? What if there are other? Whereas if there's less options, then you're more certain in like, yeah, this is the best of those ones, right?
I remember hearing like a word about this in one of the business classes. There is actually a term for this. Where you have way too many options, and because you are like dreaming or I guess fantasizing about the other things, you end up not appreciating what you ended up having or getting.
Yeah. So
it
I
was
think
a thing, but yeah.
And so that's the thing, and that's cross genders. I think we see this is that. So I think that's one thing that kind of puts additional strain on relationships. Of like, if you get with a partner and they're obviously human and aren't perfect and have some flaws. When it's like, they're not quite perfect in this way. Like, what if there's another person out there that isn't? And obviously online you're constantly showing like the most perfect, like picturesque versions of everyone. And like, well, this person seems a lot better. Like they don't have whatever this flaw is. And if you go for them, then you realize that they're human too eventually. And a kind of cycle continues like that. So that's one problem, I think. Another is a problem of standards, right? So there's been some research on this, though not a ton. But what it looks like is as you increase the number of potential mates for someone, men's standards generally seem to be relatively consistent. There's someone who they would be willing to like sleep with. There's someone who they'd be willing to commit with, and it's at this level. So you show them 100 people. If all the ones who meet their like sleep with standards, they'll sleep with them. And you can show them like a couple. You can show them a ton, and it'll be relatively consistent. However, with women, it's not the case. Their standards are what you'd call elastic, right? With respect to the number of choices. Where as you increase the number of choices, their standards increase as well. Generally, it seems like they want the best of whatever options they have. So if there's a small number, then it's like it's a small. You choose the best of a small pool, which is what it's historically been, right? Until technology came about, like it was the best in your town or your tribe or whatever, depending on the time period. And now it's the best in like your city or your like province or state or even your country, because you can see everyone. They're all there. And so I think that puts a lot more pressure on everyone, because now women, just because of their like the psychology there, are less happy with all the men that they could be with, because they kind of innately want the best. And men are less happy because they're constantly having to compete with each other, and they're now having to compete for higher and higher standards, because the bar keeps getting raised higher and higher to a rather extreme degree.
It's the first time I'm hearing about this study, and it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, that was.
But holy crap, this thing is like expensive.
Yeah, there is a fair bit of nuance, and obviously, so now the majority of people meet online now. That's what the data shows, and it shouldn't be surprising to anyone to know that women receive far more like attention on dating apps and stuff. There's lots of statistics quoted around the top like 80% of women want around the top like 20 to 5% of men, and generally that's what the data shows. It depends on where you're getting it from. Some of the like dating apps like Tinder that has a lot more men on it, and is a lot more like hookup focused. Generally has a worse skew of like the women want the higher men, just probably because there's more men on there and there are more options and stuff. But
we also have to like think about where the data was from, right? Like, do you have sources on where the cities were? Because for example, like when you look at, I don't know, like a place like California or something, you can definitely understand the standards for women there would be like much higher, because they're like, expecting so much more as compared to some other city where, I don't know, they're more conservative, or they're more like, they just in generally they have less options, or the culture itself is just like, less open.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing that I don't know. I don't know the data based on like cities and stuff, or even really countries. I know, because I assume most of this data from dating app stuff is generally from the North America, probably America proper. The United States is probably where a lot of the data comes from, just because that's the hub of things. But it would be interesting to see like what the data looks like from like...
Yeah, because like when they say top 80% of women, how? Like, what are the metrics? What makes them the top 80?
So what that would be is as rated by men in desirability. So generally, there would probably be attractiveness and stuff, but it's generally that's how. And depending on the study, different studies like kind of use different metrics of different things. So it's hard to exactly pinpoint of like this is the exact number. So it's best to take this more as a general trend of like this is generally how things are, but the exact is. but it's usually it would be rated by men. So the women who are most desirable by men and the men who are most desirable by women, and how do they match up? So that's what I would be meant by like the top like 80% or the top any percent of women
Right.
would be desirability as viewed by men for potential partners generally. And this is all generally like heterosexual relationships as well is what this is, because the dynamics between like in like gay relationships and stuff is completely different and completely
I'd assume,
a lot of times simpler actually for like especially for like men and women and stuff, because then a lot of their different desires and stuff match up a little better. But back to the issue of like men's issues. So this is kind of a general and it's trend that's kind of problematic because obviously relationships are a very important part of life. I would consider it a kind of one of the fundamental like human experiences is like intimate romantic relationships. And we can also see a little bit from the data that the men seem to be less happy outside of relationships. Women seem to generally be more okay with not being in a relationship, which probably also kind of pushes some of these metrics, right? Because if they're less interested in it, then they're probably they don't desire as much to engage in it, right? It's not as important, so they don't pursue
I
it.
wonder if like also cultural forces or factors or affect that part at least, because like when a man is not in a relationship, men generally don't share much with their good friends. And they generally just like bottle up a lot of these things, while women probably just have good friends. They have like good social connections. They're just like generally more content.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting thing. Because I think you're absolutely right in that women generally have much closer connections with other women. They share a lot more. It's a lot more intimacy there. So they can get that a lot more with friends, where men generally can't. And then the question then becomes like, how much of that is cultural and how much of that is evolutionary or biological.
Oh, okay.
Because like one argument could be that it's cultural because like maybe we view men as like who I don't know, we view it as uncool or unmanly to share your feelings or something with other men, which is a possibility. But on the other side of it, I would say that it's possible that you think maybe from an evolutionary perspective, like men having closer relationships with other men, if they're going out and doing dangerous things like hunting a mammoth or something, or going to war, which is generally a lot of the things that positions that men have had to occupy. If you're very close with someone and then they like get stepped on by a mammoth or get like shot in the head with like a cannonball or something, you can't be like super broken up about that. You have to kind of be like, oh, that sucks. You can be sad about it. Then you kind of replace them with another person, right? And that's so I think it's probably like most things. It's probably a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. But I think that the solution that some people purport of like, oh, well, we should just like change the culture so that all men like share feelings and stuff and that'll fix it, I don't think is nuanced enough to actually work. I think that it ignores some of the biological basis for
Exactly.
the potential of this difference, which I think is because I don't think that's a solution that a lot of men want or would work for them. So I don't think that would.
I was gonna say like the opposite, because like I was gonna say like evolutionary factors maybe are at play. You took the compassion factor, or you mentioned that one. I might mention the competition factor, because like you have a small gene pool of potential partners as a man, right? Like even if you have like buddies and partner, the other male kind of friends in your, let's say like whatever, like their hypothetical like old age village. To create dominance, or to create like the impression of like sturdiness or like stability and stuff, you don't generally show your weakness to others. That's probably an evolutionary thing too. So that's why you just don't share your weakness with other men, because like other men generally are your competition.
That's true. Yeah, you do have to constantly be competing, especially against other men and for the desirability of women, right? So if you're someone who does show more, are more emotional, and does show more of that, then if women see that and then view you as, and then see someone else who is maybe feeling the same things as you, but is like, let's say, bottling them up or whatever, and so not showing it, they look like they have themselves together more. They look like they're more in control of the situation, and they look like they're more capable. And so they might choose that person. So then you can think evolutionarily, to run that forward thousands of years. They keep doing that. Well, now all men have a almost like biological drive to not show that, because that's what their ancestors
Yeah.
didn't do, and
Even
that's what
even
led
now,
them.
even now in society, because like maybe society nowadays has changed a lot with the more connectedness and stuff. But like let's say like 50 years, 70 years ago, in our small city of Winnipeg, to land a job or to get into like positions of power, you had to like show yourself as like somebody who's put together, somebody who's like skilled, confident and stuff like that. Because confidence always like kills in anywhere, in any setting, any social setting, right? So you generally, yeah, generally men are, even in social settings, are inclined to not, show a lot of these emotions.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless they're like really close with somebody and they know like it's a safe space for them, that they won't share that, or they won't like judge them and stuff like that. There won't be any negative, harmful effects coming out of it.
Yeah, and I think this is this ties into the broader thing of, I think this is why men's issues aren't talked about as much, or as stuff, and why these conversations never really happen, is because no one wants to actually be the one to broach it and be the one to
Mhm.
actually put it forward, because if you do, then you look like you're weak, or not, compared to all the men who aren't, right? So
Mhm.
I think in a lot of circumstances, men are also kind of afraid to actually even bring up the issues that they're facing in society and stuff, because of this kind of negative effect that it has. So I think that's another thing that kind of pushes this stuff down. So yeah, so to tie the end relationship thing up a little bit, I guess at the end of relationships, there's also some negative things towards that men kind of struggle with like divorce and stuff. Obviously, a lot of divorce is you split like assets and things 50-50, which is something that women select for. They select for someone who is higher in socioeconomic stuff, but you don't split like youth or health or any of those, or like physical attractiveness 50-50. You don't like stick a device in and like suck half of the like attractiveness of the women and give it to the guy.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of it's kind of there an interesting like kind of a double standard thing almost, of like that I think nowadays especially does put additional pressures on relationships and makes them a little bit
I
harder.
definitely agree. This is probably going to be one of my biggest concerns when I do end up, going into a long-term relationship, I think. Because like getting married is a stressful thing. Because like even with the best of intentions, um, it's really hard conversation to have with your partner. Because like, hey, in case we ever get divorced, asking for prenup is always like has a negative connotation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, these are difficult things. But like, as I said, like if you look at everything objectively, when you have a partner, suppose like they're a working person, right? If they're a working person, then we have joint assets. We don't count like dollar for dollar, of course, but like we would have some sort of an agreement, like how much of the assets are yours, how much of the assets are mine. In that case, it's easier in case of a split. If somebody is a homemaker, if somebody is a housewife, maybe part-time worker taking care of the family, stuff like that. You, as a man, you of course should recognize their efforts. It's not like they didn't do the work for nothing. Like they raised your kids with values. They gave them all the, I guess they taught them all the morals and stuff. So that definitely has a value. That is like the most difficult one for me, I guess. In that case, if a split happens, it's a big one, because not only the emotions um get severed, because like your kid of course is probably going to be, because I feel like kids are the biggest, what do you call that, like kids get the
Victims of
worst end
it.
of the stick, yeah, victims.
Yeah, yeah.
um and even with the partners, because like they get like scarred, definitely they get scarred mentally. In terms of assets, I mean, of course that's a difficult one. That's where the fights happen. So that's why like I don't have a solution for that, and that's why it concerns me a lot, because
Yeah, yeah, it
how
is.
how would I approach that in a relationship?
It is a problematic one. Um, what I've heard, was it, I think it was from a divorce lawyer. That probably the best option would be to just have a maybe like a prenuptial agreement that says like whatever's in your name is yours, whatever is in my name is mine, and any joint assets are then split. So if you have like a house in both your names, then that's split. But if something's in one individual person's name, then it's that individual person's. I think that's about it for the relationship side. Because I guess another kind of inconsistency I think we have is with abortion and those kind of things. If the woman gets pregnant, and depending on who wants to keep and who doesn't want to keep the child, right? Because if you have a case where like a woman gets pregnant and she wants to keep the child and the guy doesn't, right? The woman can keep the child and the guy can't force her to get abortion, which I think is good and generally positive, right? In the same sense, if the woman doesn't want the child and the guy wants to keep it, the woman can get abortion, right? Which I think is also generally.
Wait, can I interrupt you? Like,
Yeah.
if you can keep the train of thought, because like one problem I already see with that first part of his sentence is the man doesn't want to keep the child, the woman wants to keep the child. Now, is the man entitled, or is the man required to pay for the child support?
That is the exact point I was making. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Is the problem is if the man says, no, I want, we should get an abortion, and the woman doesn't, right? Then currently, I think the man is still required to pay like child support, which doesn't really, I don't think is really a fair thing, because they didn't have any say in the actual the matter. Right? It was.
I guess so.
It was exclusively the woman's choice to do that, right? Once the child's like, and then you're like, oh, well, now I want to leave or something. Then that's a different story. But like before that happens, well, you still have the choice of whether or not you want to have the child. If it's not a mutual decision, then it shouldn't be. They shouldn't have mutual responsibility, I don't think. And so
I definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So in where there is easy access to abortion services and other care for women, I think that the best option there would very easily just be to say that if a man doesn't want the child, he can sign away rights saying like, okay, fine, you don't have to support them, and you also don't have any ownership of it. So like if the child's born, you don't get like 50% custody or anything. That's the woman's child, and you don't have any like rights to that or anything.
But that's a difficult problem even socially, right? Because like it's a pregnant one. This brings back actually, this probably sidesteps a little bit more. But I feel like the old school values and traditions we had in society were there for a reason. I remember like I listened to a few of your podcasts before, and I think with Laika you mentioned one part where we break down all the walls, all these social structures, all these restrictions, and now you start realizing the value behind them.
Yeah.
I generally am not of the opinion of like breaking everything down, because I first try to evaluate why they were there and everything. That's where a joint family really helps out, because a joint family really solves problems even of like a working parent and a working dad and working mom, because like that's one of the big arguments I notice with men and women's issues, or I guess men's issues, is that women generally say that, hey, the men in society or the patriarchy doesn't want me to work and doesn't want me to question the wellness of the baby and stuff, right? But it's true that if a woman is working all the time and the baby's in the daycare like most of their life or most of their childhood life, it's going to be, it would have been better if they had somebody who cared for them like all the time, and the baby knew and stuff. That's where a grandmother or somebody in the family would be like really helpful. So I feel like, yeah, that kind of solves that problem. I guess coming back to the topic, we were at divorce or something, right?
Yeah. Well, I would just say on your point, I think that's what the data shows as well. I haven't looked into super deeply the actual data of like children and the effects of divorce and stuff, but I believe that is the case generally of that like outcomes are better for children who have more interaction with their like mothers, and for male children especially, outcomes are better if they also have a father figure, right? It's outcomes are not very good if they do not. Though for women it doesn't seem to matter as much. It seems that they're more okay with having just a single mother household. What was I saying? So yeah, that's so in the cases where abortion services are available, that's the case. Though that's another problem. It goes more into the women's issue, so we won't touch on it too much. But like, abortion isn't available everywhere, and like in more conservative places, like in the American South, things are. There's lots of issues there. So so like, speaking of men's issues, so men are, I think, really struggling with relationships and stuff right now. I think they're a lot more, I don't know, you might have heard terms like the male loneliness epidemic, that I think is something that we're struggling with. We have a lot of men who can't find relationships, can't find that kind of part of life that's a big problem. But besides that, we then also have economic success being the other side. And this is where a lot of ideas like the patriarchy and a lot of other stuff comes in. So I want to. What have you heard about this? Like, what are your opinions on here? What do you think the issues are, like, economically? Like, what do you think the position is for men right now before we get into it?
It's a dire situation where patriarchy it's really misunderstood, I guess, or not misunderstood. Maybe it was there's definitely, like, bad apples in the patriarchy system, but patriarchy was a consequence of men being strong, men working outside, stuff like that. Patriarchy was turned upside down, as we definitely know, when the we know when the war happened in North America and stuff like that, when women had to take over, like, lots of jobs, decision making and stuff like that. Of course, like, yeah, there is, like, okay, I'll summarize this quickly. I agree that there are some parts where there are problem, but it's really unnecessary for, let's say, like, the other side, or the Protestant side, to take the whole thing and throw it in men's faces, because, like, patriarchy has resulted in, like, some worthwhile things. Even now, you see, like, lots of jobs where only men are working, and they have to be working that way because of their, like, biological sides. So patriarchy, by definition, is it okay? I probably have to, like, I may have to correct myself on this one. Is it the dominance of men in the society, or?
Yeah, I think it's generally the idea, though it gets construed in modern, like, discussions all
Right?
the
Yeah.
time, with different things. So exactly what someone means by the patriarchy is difficult. I think it's the concept of men kind of being in charge of a
Right. And they're
whether
keeping their
that
position.
whether in society, yeah, of, like, having, like, men leading the society, or whether in the home of, like, men being the ones, like, leading that and being in charge there. And I think it's then extrapolated to try to argue that, like, men are, like, helping other men, like, succeed, and, like, part of the patriarchy is the reason, like men are in, like, positions of power, is because we have a society that, like, requires it, and stuff like that. I think is the general argument.
I feel like our society probably responds to money and economy a lot more than patriarchy and values. I really do feel that way, because as I said, it's very easy to just, like, slap these, big connotations and just, like, be done with the problems, instead of, like, looking deep in the factors. Because, like, world is a complex place, and at any time, if you see, like, any issues going on, like, I even have some examples of, like, these Pride Month flags, where companies put on these flags for, like, short term, and then why do they take them off? There's always, like, money that's flowing down, and it's really important for us to, like, look into the factors. And I don't think it necessarily men are just keeping their places, because, like, of course, if there's this really simple example, I think I heard one time, that said that if patriarchy is really happening, or I think it was more towards the gender pay gap, but never mind. Yeah, we'll get back to that when that comes.
Well, yeah, we can get to it right now, because I
Okay.
happen to have data on that, and stuff. Yeah, so I think the argument you were about to make, though, was that if there was really a gender pay gap where women could be paid less for this to work the same jobs, and women were equally as competent in those jobs, then any company would exclusively hire women
Definitely.
and never hire another man
Yeah.
in their life.
Money's always the solution. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right. And, like, even if there's, and so even if we say that, okay, well, they're these capitalists, they care about money in all other circumstances, but for some reason they really care about, like, the men working their whatever menial jobs they have, and so much so that they're willing to sacrifice a large amount of money for it. Even if that was the case, then what a woman could do is just start a company and hire women, and not be patriarchal or whatever, and outperform all male companies by the fact that all the women, she would have a significantly lower costs than all the men,
Yeah.
because the men are paying all the men arbitrarily higher and stuff. It's not actually in reality true. Lots of people try to say that there's, like, I think it was like 72 or like 83 cents to every dollar a man makes, a woman makes, which, like, actually isn't true at all when you look at the data. So that only exists if you ignore a lot of very basic factors that anyone who with any kind of integrity looking at the data should account for. Things like how many hours the people work, or what kind of jobs they work, right? When you account for a lot of these things, what happens is the pay gap, just by adding in these, like, basic things that everyone should be looking at when trying to see, are people actually paid differently? The pay gap goes from like whatever, like 83 cents to 99 cents to every dollar a man makes, right? So
Yeah.
it's a 1 cent difference just in the most basic factors that anyone should ever, like anyone looking at it should be taking into account. So it's like,
Yeah.
so it basically disappears when you take that into account. And so obviously that's not as flashy and stuff. And so what people are finding with the pay gap data isn't really that women are paid less than men. It's more of like people who work less or work easier jobs are paid less than people who work more. Like say someone who works 8 hours versus someone who works 4, or takes a harder job like working on an oil rig or doing something else that's more demanding, like being a CEO or something.
And I definitely want to mention like some of these factors where, like society also plays a role, because like women, let's say, are more uncomfortable like going out into like these lonely big cities, working late night jobs and stuff, right? It's more comfortable, it's more easier for men to do that, because like, there is like all these factors of like safety, I guess preferences, like comfortability. Men just being bigger and stronger have less to like, be worried about outside. I guess I'm sure there are like also going to be counterpoints where women's activists would be saying, hey, why are men being like all the rapists or like stuff like that? Why are they on the street making life difficult for women? But like, world is not a fair place. Like you can't pool everybody in one thing. Like sure, there are some people that way, but there are also like robbers and everything. They don't look for like men or women. They look for easy targets or something.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think in that, what was I going to say with that? Yeah, because like taking on, men are generally the ones who have to take on the more like high risk jobs, things that are more dangerous and stuff. Generally, are men, and the part of that is because men are more risk taking, right? Men are more willing to take on higher amounts of risk. I could think evolutionarily, because that's just been what's required of men, right? Men have had to go out hunting, they have to go to war, they have to do all these kinds of things that like require them to be willing to take on risks. And the men who did take on risks, they either failed and then are gone, who cares about them, or they took on risks and succeeded exponentially compared to everyone else.
Yeah.
They took a risk and they got rewarded for it. And then they were at the top, they were the most desirable. Women chose them, they passed on their genes, and now we have a bunch of men who are more risk-taking. So yeah, that's so that is one of the things facing men, of like the kind of myths around like pay gaps. There's lots of things of patriarchy, of like there's lots of there's now a strange like trying to argue because there have been some historical like things of like keeping women out of like work and education, like that has been true, and we've generally we've removed a lot of that and are now seeing some fairly positive results for women because of that. But it's I would say it's not like men haven't had their share of issues historically too. Like one issue that a lot of people like to point out is that there was a brief period of time where men could vote and women couldn't. For most of history, neither men or women could vote because everyone was peasants and it was very rich nobles and stuff doing everything. But for a period of time, there was men could vote and women couldn't. But I would say for a much longer period of time, it was men have to go out and fight wars in rather brutal conditions and women don't. I think
if you also follow like these other factors, as I mentioned, is like money does result in all these decisions. The reason men could vote is because like men were part of the economy, men were part of like all the decision makings, right? So they initially they were eventually given the option to vote. I think I was like recently following the women's suffrage movement and like all of these like 1920s, I think from like 18 somethings to like 1930s, 1940s, and I saw like at least this one pattern where as women were becoming more, I guess, involved in the economy, that's when eventually people had to accept, like they, of course they had to fight for it, but people eventually had to accept that they were also part of the economy and they were also part of the decision makings, because like most of these decisions that the government or all the authorities make result back to the economy. They don't necessarily result directly to people's families. Rights and everything is surely that's one thing, but like it always works for the collective society and the money making capability, because people survive off of the money. It's your survival capability. So when women become part of the economy, they were eventually required to be, I guess, voters, or they demanded the right to be voters.
Yeah,
so I guess, that's why I don't really like blame That's one thing I want to I guess I like to use against like this notion of patriarchy is that men, as you said, like men were also not, part of the voting mechanism like for a
Yeah,
long time. So
I guess it
it
wasn't a
happened,
gender
yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah, it wasn't really a gender thing. It happened as like, the world evolved and the society changed.
Yeah, I guess I guess because men were getting the right to vote. They didn't get that until the economic structure changed, where individual people started gaining more wealth, and they
Mhm.
started being, instead of being like serfs and like poor laborers, had their own like individual like farms and stuff, and they started being or jobs and stuff, and started being more of part of the society there, and then they got the right to vote, and so it kind of follows that, and has nothing really to do with gender, except for the fact that men were the ones having to work more, which I guess is a gendered thing. So yes, we have that. So now we have, so there is some truth in the reality that men for working. So men generally have had to been expected to work more and work to provide for women. That's just generally been an expectation that's been put on them, and generally perform at a very high caliber. And so there's been a lot of like pressure for men to try to perform at the very top, and a lot of rewards for that. And so I think we see this kind of play out in biology as well. So we've talked a lot about risk taking, but what we haven't talked about is actually differences in intelligence, right? So intelligence and cognitive ability literature is a pretty sizable. There's a pretty sizable body of scientific research on it, and we can see across cultures and across like basically everything. The intelligence of men and women is almost exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
The average intelligence of men and women are like smack dab in the middle, right on top of each other. There's really no way to tell any difference. There's some difference in like what the specific factors that they're good at. So like men are maybe a little bit good at like spatial reasoning, and women are slightly better at like verbal reasoning and stuff like that. There's some
Also
like,
maybe like some emotional things, I'm assuming.
So I think that well, it's hard to add that
Like
in
caring,
exactly
nurturing
into
type
intelligence,
things.
but sorry, what did you say?
Like caring or nurturing. I'm definitely thinking that some society also kind of plays into that, or that like
So,
fosters some of those
actually,
emotions. But I think biologically
possibly,
as well.
but there
Yeah.
is lots of scientific research on that. What you might be talking about is more of like empathy, is the concept of empathy, and there is scientific research showing that empathy is women are higher in empathy, and it's not really it's not a societal construct. It is exists in women and also exists in some other animals. A lot of these, the interesting thing is a lot of some of these differences between men and women, things like differences in empathy, differences in I'm sure you've heard men like things more than women, women like people more than things or whatever, and that's also replicated in animals like monkeys and stuff. We can see that kind of thing, especially with the men and things. Women are a lot more. I think overall, just a slightly more like fluid in their I don't know what they like, what they do. Like men are much more like fitting into a role than women do, I think. But yeah, so that's one thing, that their intelligences are relatively similar. There are some differences in like what exactly they're good at, but they're not super big. But for the scientific studies that actually record it, what there is a very big difference is in variance. So women's variance is relatively low. So intelligence generally looks like a bell curve, right? It's like goes like that. So there's tons of people in the middle. Almost everyone's in the middle. And there's a little bit of people that are a little bit far right. And there's a tiny bit of people at the ends, right? The difference, though, is for men, there's a bit more variance, right? So their bell curve, instead of being super heightened in the middle, is slightly more elongated. And now, while I'm making hand signals like this, my hand signals are super like over. I am showing it what it looks like for something to be more out. They're very, very close. Whereas, so there's not very much difference, especially in the middle, right? But the variance is a much higher for men. So there's a much more of like, some of them are way at the bottom, some of them are way at the top. And what that does is, at the very ends, at the very farthest points, we see is that the vast majority of people who are like extremely stupid, like the people with like legitimate like developmental like learning disability type things, we'd classify them as. They're just they're like the most like stupid people in the world are men, like the vast majority of them. And the vast majority of the people who are like super intelligent, hyper intelligent, like the geniuses of the world, are also men, right? There's a disproportionate like amount of men at both of those sides, and so that's another interesting thing that I think goes along with the risk taking, right? Because it's a lot of with men, it seems a lot of it's biologically throwing the dice a lot, right? Because like you throw it a bunch, and most men it is not going to work out for. And we can see that actually in like mating statistics. I think everyone has on average twice as many female ancestors as they do male ancestors, which is an interesting statistic.
Wait, what?
Yeah, because on average, I guess
one man, multiple wives, is that what you're trying to say?
Yep, that would be the type of thing. So you can imagine the extreme of this is like Genghis Khan, right? Like one guy and tons and tons and tons of wives, to the point where almost everyone in the world has some amount of his genes in them, right? But tons of different wives. So like, and historically, that's kind of a lot of what it's been. There's been a lot of kind of polygamous societies where a few men have a lot of wives, right? So what that kind of eventually runs out to, and it's probably not exactly 2-to-1, but it's close to that, right? So there's significantly more female ancestors than male because a lot of the men never reproduce at all, and then some of the men, they perform way high, they're hyper desirable, they're the very top, and then they have lots of offspring with lots of women.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So it's and that's just kind of basically how things kind of naturally play out. And there's lots of other differences. Men are generally more like in aggression. Men are generally more physically aggressive of actually like punching people. Women are more like psychologically aggressive of like manipulating people, like lying and like doing that stuff. There's differences in the 5-factor model of like clinical psychology. If you're familiar with that, women are generally more higher in agreeableness, so like wanting to like smooth the tides over in like a bargaining situation, more likely to want things to be better for the other person and things to be like stuff rather than trying to get the most for like myself kind of things. And they're slightly higher in neuroticism. So like
I wonder if that like negatively affects them in business situations and stuff.
I think that absolutely does. I think that
statistics though, like how likely are they that maybe you may have to take it as a grain of salt because like if in general it does apply to all women, but it might not apply to all the personalities of women that do end up going into like the top business positions.
I think
maybe they have like more of like other characteristics.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Yeah, so it's probably on a factor, and I assume agreeableness and risk taking are probably negatively associated with achievement in a lot of these kind of structures, because the people who are going to go out, they're going to try to take the risk, they're going to ask for the raise, they're going to go move to a different company where they're going to be paid higher and stuff, do these kind of risky and behaviors or like demand that they be given more or whatever, are going to be going to get more on average, more likely. So the people who have these traits, which are generally men, you'd expect to kind of perform higher there. And then the women who do perform higher, you'd probably expect them to also have those traits, because there's definitely some women who are less agreeable, and you'd expect them to probably be excel in positions where less agreeableness, perhaps being a lawyer or something, would be very beneficial. You don't want an agreeable lawyer. You want an extremely disagreeable lawyer. So like women who become lawyers are probably very disagreeable. So yeah, that's so agreeableness, and then neuroticism. So just like sensitivity to negative emotion is also something that women are generally higher in. But those are just biological differences, and some of them, I think a lot of them do kind of play a role, though it's hard to tell exactly how much of a role. But so then we say, okay, we have men that are higher risk taking, have higher variance of intelligence and stuff. how would we expect that in a kind of society that isn't at all biased towards men or women, that is completely like equal in every other footing? If you just have the pure like base evolutionary characteristics that people are going, how would that society look like and arrange itself? And I think what you might expect to find is that lots of women are generally in the middle and generally safe, generally good positions. Women are across the board pretty good, doing pretty well. And for men, lots of them are also in the middle and stuff, but there's a lot more at the very highest levels of achievement and at the very lowest levels of achievement. You could think of it like any kind of game of like chance or anything. Like if you take a very big risk on, like, you put it all on black, a lot of the times you're going to lose and you're going to be at the end. But a lot of times if you succeed and you put it all on like black or whatever, and you win, then you're going to get a great payout or whatever. As putting it all on black might not. That's not. The odds are like 50, almost 50% there. So maybe that's not a best analogy. But you know what I mean, right? You take the risk and you get rewards, right? And so, well, we look at our current society. What do we see? Well, we see at the highest end, we do see that a lot of the CEOs and stuff, a lot of the people who are working the absolute hardest, putting in the most hours, doing the biggest jobs and stuff, are men. They're the ones at the very top. They're the ones who took a bunch of risks and stuff. You can see, like, Elon Musk is a great example of this. Someone who, like, he made, like, whatever this PayPal, I think that was things, but like that he made millions or whatever on that. And then what he did was he was like, okay, no, I'm going to risk it all again to make like rockets that shoot out into space. Now I'm going to risk it all again to make like electric cars, again and again. And there's probably lots of. Sorry, yeah.
I agree with this. I also wanted to mention like a couple of more factors that I observed, at least in my research, is that being a CEO, like, for example, why are not a lot of women being CEOs is because, like, first of all, yes, they're definitely like these personality traits. At least I guess at this point, we might fight on, or some people might fight on, like, hey, whether biology even plays any factor or not. But I would say, like, assume personality traits are true, and they in my opinion they are true. Like they definitely stem from biology. Now, keeping that in mind, being a CEO, it's not just like, one-time risk-taking or stuff like that. They have to make the hardest decisions every single day of their life, because the easy decisions are always made by the employees. If it's an easy decision, if it's like backed by statistics, the employees will make it. If they're really torn between two decisions, it always comes back up to the CEO. And CEO always has like this balance and benefit, or I guess profit and loss kind of situation, where if they don't make the good decision, the board can easily vote them out. If they consistently make bad decisions, as you've seen, like in lots of companies, they get kicked out by the board. So constantly living in this like uncertain thing where they have to make hard decisions every single day of your life requires a lot of like these mental and personality traits as well. So I'm definitely thinking like that's probably one of the factors that lots of people are ignoring behind these arguments. So yeah,
I think because there's probably lots of like Elon Musks who were alive and they risked it all on they got it big, then they risked it all again, and then they lost it because their idea of sending rockets into space was a stupid idea that never was going to work, because whatever they did wasn't sending rockets into space that happened to work. And they failed, and now we don't hear about them and we don't know about them. But yeah, I do think the CEOs do make a lot of very big decisions. Getting to that point requires a lot of work constantly throughout their life to actually build up to that point. There's an argument to be had about like how much compensation should they get and stuff. I think it would be fair to argue that a lot of very wealthy people have more wealth than they should comparative to the value provide and the way economic systems work, of like kind of compound interest style type things. The more wealth you have, the more you get. But that's kind of a side argument that I just wanted to address, that we're aware of it. It's irrelevant to the point here, though, is that the people in those positions you'd expect to be men, because doing that not only is biologically like likely of the most, because you have to be very high risk taking, very intelligent and stuff. The very small fraction of people that are there are likely to be men. Also, it's also the men who gain a lot of the benefit from that, right? Especially like for desirability in society and like from a mate perspective, right? Because again, socioeconomic status is something that women generally choose for. So being very successful provides great benefit to the man, they become hyper desirable, doesn't really provide the same benefit to the woman. It actually kind of hurts in the same way because
it does hurt them. Yeah.
Because there's studies on this about the desire for socioeconomic status isn't mediated by socioeconomic achievement of the woman, which means like as she increases her status, she desires still desires a higher performing man, thus shrinking the potential people that she would be even attracted to, which is
and yeah, even like statistically, men the traits that men value in women generally are not seen in the most like up top positions, because like women have to have the similar traits as the high performing men, which are in general not desirable to a lot of men. So like, and I think one also factor is that men generally don't care about right socioeconomic status.
Yeah, you're right. Men don't really care about it at all. The one time they might care about it is in the case where there's a little bit of discussion about when it exceeds their own. Do they not like that a little bit? It's not a very, as far as I can tell, it's not a very strong thing, but it does seem like if there might be a little bit of negative thing when women's
it's a precautionary thing, because like the power imbalance like compounds into the relationship, and it like just makes a bad dynamic eventually.
It is a hard thing of like because like if you're at all aware of how desirability and stuff works, if you know the other person is not going to find you as desirable, like statistically speaking, that might make you a little bit less cautious. You might, if you know that that's going to be the dynamic, you might select for someone else, which is what the data kind of shows, is that like you're probably going to select someone who you think is going to desire you, which makes sense generally, I suppose. Which direction do I want to head next? So I suppose let's keep going down this and say that so we see that men generally achieve higher, and generally a lot of the benefits that men get from like a lot of having much more choice and stuff, women kind of get by default by kind of being women in the society. They already have a ton of choices. Their big problems stem from like having way too many choices and way too many options, and like too many men approaching them, which can also be similarly undesirable. But so the benefits that men get from like achieving high, a lot of them women just don't get. So there's just the pure like economic benefits, which are beneficial to an extent, but a lot of times as you get up higher, I think that like the fifth like Lamborghini isn't gonna help you very much. It's not gonna make you all that much more happy. Then I think before we move on, we'll talk a little bit more about high academic achievement, but I want to also point out where men struggle, right? Because it's not just that men are achieving higher stuff. They also pay a price for this in general as a gender, right? They also achieve much worse results, right? So in the U.S., I believe it is, like 93.2% of prisoners are male, right? Which is like a pretty gigantic statistical like portion of the population, right? And some of that might come from like just arbitrary well, I guess it's a men's issues thing, so that we can talk about this actually is men, when convicted of the same crime, men and women of the exact same crime, men on average receive a sentence that's 63% longer when they commit the exact same crime in the eyes of the law, which is obviously a pretty big disparity, right? 63% isn't a small number, and that's a men's issue.
It's a big one.
Yeah,
it's not just here. I know a couple of things even in India. It's like being guilty until proven innocent, and lots of people are also taking advantage of that rule, where like if you're a divorced party, your assets will definitely get split, even if like let's say the woman was in the wrong, where like she was committing adultery out of marriage and stuff like that, like she was doing something else, or she herself was feeling out of marriage. She's like, hey, I don't love you anymore, I want to divorce, stuff like that. So even if like it's not the man who initiated the thing, he always has to end up paying the price. It's statistically generally just more true. Another thing is like rape used to be a big situation there, and as a consequence, what happens is in society, it's just like really people just have very strong feelings against any man who is accused of
oh yes, yeah.
Having like done sexual assaults or anything like that. that the consequence of that is like misuse of the whole system, where some woman would be like, "Hey, this guy touched me in the bus" and stuff like that, even though he didn't, and they demand money from them. It's not. Yeah, it's. I think it might be contained at this point. I don't have statistics exactly on how rampant that was, but it was a big issue where the guys were like brutally beaten by the people around them. So like people literally just like start hitting others. When he gets into the court or he gets into the police station, nobody listens to the man until he's like completely proven guilty. Until like by some miracle or by some luck, he can be proven innocent. Most of the times they're like beaten half to death. Those kinds of issues, like granted that rape is a big issue and society really needs to address that, but the consequence of the, as I said, like spring being pushed too much on this side, it bounces so far back that it has like negative consequences for men, and that's still a big issue that they should really address.
Yeah. I think false accusations is a big thing that isn't taken as seriously in our society. But yeah, generally, I do think men are generally considered looked less favorably and generally considered more like guilty of anything that's accusations, whether it's true or not. Another thing I will note about that, statistically speaking, is interesting because black people also have a kind of thing, and it's really more black men. Black women don't have the same problem, but black men have an additional like 10% longer sentences than like white men. Black women and white women, I think, have generally closer to the same sentencings. It seems to be an extra just racial thing on black men, which particularly hurts them. And that also gives a little bit of context of how the disparity is, right? So like the racial disparity is 10%, and the gender disparity is 63, indicating that like the black man is more at disadvantage in court because he is a man than because he is black, which is I think a good thing to just demonstrate, because I think there's a lot less care taken to like actual like gender equality than there is things like racial equality. And we also see similar problems. We see that like over 60% of homeless people in the U.S. were male, according to some of the research. I've also seen other research pointing to much higher things, but I know that it's at least over 60% is, which again, very unlucky, very not very intelligent men at the very low end.
Actually, homelessness brings about another issue where I know this one person. Like this really hits me home, because when I was working in Walmart, like a few years ago, when I was like teenager and just working like one of the starting jobs, there was this homeless man I always saw. I always met this homeless man like in the evenings, and he was always nice. Like he was one of the put together people, and I never saw him like reeking of alcohol or smoke or anything like that. So he never did any drugs, and he himself said it a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
He sounded smart. One time I just sat down with him and I was asking him like a bunch of questions, like, "Hey, what's happening? Like, tell me your story." The really sad part is what happened is he used to be a really well-to-do miner. He used to be like financially well, and he had like multiple properties, cars, and everything. And he used to be working. I think he was a miner or something in like mining industry up in Thompson. So he had a family. He had like a wife and kids and some stuff. Um, what happened is he eventually something happened and he lost his job. When he came down to the city, he was in the transition. He was like moving. He was like trying to find another work and stuff like that. And issues in his family came around. They eventually, his wife divorced him, took the custody, took the assets. He disproportionately did not get anything, not even the house. I think he had to move into some apartment or something. Eventually, he couldn't like pay everything, pay all the support and everything, and he was thrown out of like I guess the social society, the economy, and everything. I think I don't exactly know how like bankruptcy or something works, but like he wasn't able to pay child support and he got like repercussions, and a bunch of like penalties were put on him, so he couldn't like, really get to work anywhere. His social credit score, and I don't exactly know about that part, but like he could eventually couldn't get a job anywhere. A nice guy out on the streets because he got the shorter end of the stick when the divorce happened. I don't care like whose problem it was. Like, okay, sure, he maybe was in the wrong, but is it really fair to like have somebody on the streets all the time?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah. it was kind of a sad story as well.
Yeah, that's a good like individual look at where some of these issues can lead. I suppose the final one of these negative issues I'll touch on is suicide rates. I'm not sure in like wealthy countries and stuff. Are you generally aware of what the suicide rates are?
Not in numbers, but generally just higher, as I've heard it. Maybe it's
And
not like
it
in
depends
comparison.
on different countries and different places have different things. And I'm talking generally just about high income countries. So this includes this probably also includes some places that are much some countries that are much nicer, some countries that
Okay.
are so it's not just like the US or just Canada. But yeah, that's a pretty insane because like you can think okay, so you think just 2 to 1 would mean that men kill themselves twice as much as women, like double the amount. That would be an insane statistic if
Yeah.
you saw it like anywhere else. It's not though. It's 3.5 men to every 1 woman.
Still, yeah, quite
Yeah,
bad.
so over 3 times the amount of men kill themselves.
Is there like age or something in the
Um,
statistic? Like
uh,
what age is generally more likely?
we do know what age is generally more likely. I don't know the exact statistics of like ratios at different ages, but I do know that men generally kill themselves when they're middle aged, right? That's generally when they in their lives. I think women generally do it when they're slightly younger if they are going to do it, though usually obviously it's less likely. And I don't know the statistics based on like because men generally do it when they're middle aged, but I don't know if an equal amount of men and women do it when they're young, and then a bunch more men do it when they're middle aged, so that the middle aged thing for men looks different than women. I don't know the actual details on that, so I'm not sure if it's women generally kill themselves earlier or equal amount of men and women kill themselves early, and then a bunch extra men kill themselves when they're middle aged. I'm not sure about that, but it is generally in the
Well, yeah.
but yeah, so it's just and I think a lot of these issues aren't really talked about as much, right? Like all the negative aspects are kind of always brushed to the side and ignored, right? What's looked at is like the highest achieving men and say, oh, look how great at the very very top it is for them, and that's not fair. And then trying to do various things that we could talk about equalizing it that don't really work and are generally hurt just everyone, while ignoring all the costs that men kind of incur as a gender from it as well. So we can kind of roll this forward a little bit and then look at like for the men achieving higher in economic prospects. We can see that obviously there's lots of pressure from women to achieve higher just because of mating things. If they want like a relationship which they desire more than women, that's more important to men. Generally, they're generally less happy being single than women. They have to achieve higher economic status, so there's a lot more pressure on them. Additionally, with that, since we've opened up everything, women have been achieving quite wonderfully, right? Women have been outperforming men in a lot of metrics, even some economic. Actually, when in much younger people, there does seem to be a little bit of that, though. Again, I'm not sure the exact data on that, and it's not super consistent across every metric. So it seems to be definitely improving there, but not super across the board, like outperforming men. Though they are definitely performing at a higher level, which means that men then have to perform at a higher level to be continually to be desirable. So it's a kind of ever improving, ever increasing bar that's put on them. In addition, women, as I'm sure you already kind of know from going to university, overall in general, across the board for universities in like North America, women are now dominating them. Right, the vast majority of people who go to university are women. The vast majority of people who graduate with undergraduate degrees are women, widely more than men. And an interesting thing that this might be doing is when we look at educationally assortative marriage, so like with marriages where the woman is more educated than the man, which theoretically might become more of a necessity as women generally outperform men in education and are overall becoming more educated, we see that the man makes more money than women, and that disparity is greater than women when the men are more educated or equal to the women, which is kind of interesting statistic because what that kind of implies is that where outperformance, because intelligence is one of the things that women, we originally discussed, women desire, where that's not met in one metric, it seems that it has to be made up for in another, almost. As if men have to perform at an even higher economic level if they are underperforming in, like, say, education. So that's just another interesting kind of just another pressure.
Is
And
it
then
just from North American study data, or
I
is it
think
in general?
we can assume, if I don't specify, that it's probably primarily North America in this case for a lot of these statistics.
Yeah.
Yeah, the study doesn't, in the title of it, it doesn't actually give the name. It just says gender asymmetry in educational and income assortative marriages was the title of the study. So I don't know the
Quite
exact.
likely, probably even just US.
Yeah, it's very possible. So that's just another interesting thing to point out of the ever increasing bar. And generally, what then happens, I've seen, is that the solution has generally been for men to just work harder, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps harder, right? And just perform more on an ever increasing bar. Continually pushing this idea that kind of like men's issues are generally like personal, while women's issues are like societal.
But yeah, I definitely agree. It's the thing is, the reason I was asking geographical, I guess, source for the data is because in a way it is only possible where you have the opportunities for somebody to still move up without proper education, or because like there are industries and there are options for you to be working. I wonder how the dynamic would play out where, like, suppose like in a developing country where maybe you don't have as many options to.
Entrepreneurship isn't as big, so if you don't have the education, it's a lot harder to actually achieve economically outperformance without that.
Because like here, even like trades pay just as well, as opposed to like, let's say if you go to some like other country where labor is like, more available, then the trades will be like, valued less, because it's just so by the demand and supply logic, the supply is way too much.
Yeah,
so yeah, they can probably still not perform with. No, I was just like trying to make like mental connections with a few of these things, but yeah, okay.
Yeah,
that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I don't know what it would be like there, but you'd imagine that perhaps women just wouldn't ever select lower education partners. You'd imagine that, yeah, perhaps that
further reducing the pool and then maybe making it much harder for the men again.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And so with this, I guess, I think one of the final notes for the educational or the income outperformance is also that I don't think we actually track the performance of men and women actually equally in a fair light, because the hypergamous nature to like date up and across socioeconomic hierarchies. If you look at any like kind of super high performing man, right, who is like whatever multimillionaire CEO or stuff, most of them, if you look like right to their left, you'll see a woman who lots of times is their wife or partner, who is living in the same giant mansion they are, is driving the same fancy cars they are, wearing the same quality clothes, eating the same quality food, going on the same vacations as they are, living the same quality of life, benefiting the same from the economics, but didn't have to go through all the work of actually building that up, had a slightly easier path of marrying into it. And on top of that, is not counted at all within a lot of the data looking at like male and female economic performance. To them, to this data, the women who pursue this path look the same as a woman who is like living in their parents' basement, can't get a job anywhere or whatever. Like to them, the outcome seems the same. Like those are counted the same, even though they're really not. And so I think that's why we also see a little bit of outperformance by men, is that it's not that in these cases men are outperforming the women, it's that women are performing just as good. They just have a much better way of doing it. They don't have to go the same way that all men do. It's rather than competing in the same arena that all men have to compete with, that's hyper competitive and hyper difficult, and you have to take on a lot of risk and stuff. They can more easily just kind of I know waiting at the finish line is something that sometimes it's referred to as, but just selecting someone who is successful and then joining in there. And so I think that's a lot of times when people like wonder like where are all the like hyper successful, hyper intelligent women who are like ambitious and want all this success, like why aren't they like competing with the men? And to some extent they are, to the women who actually want to like build things and stuff do. But I think a lot of the women who are like smart like that, they kind of identify that they do have this extra kind of privilege and they can do this, and so like they take the more intelligent route to get there, right? They take a more
I agree.
efficient.
Yeah, because like comparing comparing the same metrics or comparing the same path for both genders is probably different because like women, like, to be fair, to reach somebody like, let's say like Jeff Bezos, he picked his wife, right? The wife had to be one of the best among all the women because like he also had a lot of choice, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So the wife still had to have done something among the, I guess,
Yeah.
her, yeah, pool
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They
to
have
be
to.
way up there. So I guess yeah, they definitely put in hard work, but it's like a different kind of work, I guess.
Yeah. So it's not counted in economic
Yeah,
success
yeah.
is what the
But
And I
then it
would,
probably also doesn't count in any of the arguments because like those women have the same goals aligned with the men because they're not like taking their place. They're like working alongside them.
yeah, yeah, it's
To marry somebody is like being alongside them than like, taking over. Why do we
yeah.
see a higher divorce rate in them anyway, though?
Wait, what
No,
is your question?
I don't know if it's just my like perception or it is actually true that like in generally well-to-do families or well-to-do like higher up socioeconomic ladders, divorce rate is more common than like everyday normal people.
I don't think it is actually. I think it's less common. I think that I think if I'm remembering correctly, I think the data shows that higher income, higher educated people are more likely to get into monogamous relationships and less likely to divorce, I think.
But how high though?
I
Once you become like the top 5%,
I don't
is
know. It
that a
could be
different
the top
statistic?
5% is. I would venture a guess. So I don't know the top 5% exactly. I would venture a guess though that the top 5% is actually pretty unlikely because we probably don't see a lot of the top 5%. I think that occasionally you do see very high profile people who get like divorced,
Hmm.
and it's a big thing when like I know Bill Gates and Melinda like separate or something. I
Yeah.
believe they
Some
did.
high profile is justified, but like, isn't aren't most like actors in Hollywood already divorced at least one time?
It's
Maybe
possible.
that's just like a
Yeah,
geographical thing.
and so we have to take into account though, like, is it more? Is your question, and I don't know if it's more because I think the divorce rate, I think it's a little bit lower now, but it was close to 50% at one point, right? So you'd imagine it is if half of all those marriages are crumbling into ruin, that's par for the course, and that's what you'd expect across the board, statistically speaking. So I don't know if it's more. I don't know if the higher income actually, like that those kind of high profile like marriages actually turn out worse. I would imagine they wouldn't, but I don't know for sure. And it could be that they do as well, but like a lot of marriage ends in divorce, unfortunately.
Yeah. Maybe it's just that industry that I'm thinking about because like there's a lot more high profile people that are under the, I guess, in the shadows that we don't know.
Yeah, it is. I feel like that's some of it. Yeah, like and yeah, any like breakup is going to be all over the news because that's something that might sell. Like,
Hmm.
oh, these popular, high-profile people they got in a breakup, and let's tell you about it. Please click on our article and give us some ad revenue.
Yeah. Okay.
That kind of thing. I guess computer science specific, obviously there's a little bit of in like STEM, people who don't understand like the science behind like human preference for different things, trying to institute discriminatory policies there.
Hmm.
I know in Canada, not even just in STEM fields, in a lot of different places, there are postings that very clearly say like preference will be given to women on their thing, which is kind of insane when the posting isn't a job that's specifically something that only like women could do or would do better. Because you could justify it maybe there, but just across the board, gender discrimination like that is insane to see. Just like blatantly,
Yeah.
like discriminating against men like that.
I
Like,
actually have a neutral view on that. Maybe a bit positive factors and a bit of negative factors.
yeah.
When I balance them out, it generally comes out in neutral because like at least like the economic factor and the basically what I'm trying to say is like if somebody is being given a handout, that's not beneficial for either the company or the candidate, right?
Yes.
Women just by having, I guess, a quota of like, like we want to hire these many diversity or these many like women employees. Eventually that just like hurts their confidence and whatnot. Okay, that's one thing. But like maybe it is beneficial in the sense that as a society, people feel certain things because like women feel, what do you call that? Um, a bit concerned or a bit uncomfortable being in a field where there's like a lot of men. I know it doesn't happen the other way around, but it generally happens like from women to men's side at least. So maybe this addresses that aspect at least because
Well, I don't know if
it's isn't it a general consensus where women just find it difficult for to be in a room or with a lot of men.
possibly. I think that sure, that could definitely be true. I think that that's reasonable that women in spaces where there's a lot of men could feel uncomfortable, and I think that it's perfectly fine to try to do things that make them more comfortable. But I don't think gender discrimination is one of the things that should be done to try to accomplish that.
I suppose I agree, yeah. Maybe there are better approaches to make them feel more welcome or make the whole environment better.
Yeah.
Like
I have nothing against like encouraging women if they
Yeah.
want to come into computer science and like trying to make it a place where they feel welcome and are happy to do it. But I don't think we should. I don't think the way to do that is to arbitrarily give them positions there or elsewhere because of their gender. I talked a
Yeah.
little bit of this in the women's issue one about how it also causes problems because it brings into question the quality of all the women candidates, right? Because if
Yeah.
some are
And I
given,
think
sorry,
I think I remember asking myself this question as well because like people are marginalized based on lots of factors. Gender is just one of them. Why isn't somebody with like low socioeconomic status given the job, you know? Like, why don't you find like these homeless people or these poor people or somebody with like a lower GPA who has a mental disability getting like the job
yeah,
just as
or
well, right?
even like religion, like how many Catholics are in your computer science organization? Is it enough? Like, do you need to get some more Catholics in there to like balance out the
Right?
whole whatever? So it's not a
It's definitely a bit political because like you only find this just certain gender or this certain race or this certain like orientation that they want in, which is kind of yeah weird because it's just one aspect, it's just one factor.
Yeah, I think the great way to like that I always kind of think about this is like how socially acceptable would it be if you did that, but instead you replaced women with white people and men with black people, and is that like is doing this on a different like metric? Is that acceptable? And I feel like if you had advertisements blatantly saying preference will be given to white people, that would be a pretty like unacceptable thing. I think we would all hopefully generally assume that's bad. We don't want that. We want things to be unbiased towards anything, and we want people to be hired based on their merit, regardless of what gender, ethnicity, or religion, or whatever they are. That
Hmm.
if it's not applicable to the actual job being done, it shouldn't be a factor in it. It should
Yeah.
people
And
should
I guess
just
yeah, this is definitely more of a band-aid solution. They're just like slapping it on and like waiting until the next one comes along. I suppose that's why I'm still neutral at this because like until we find a better solution, maybe just keep it and have actual active discussions on what should be done next.
sure. What is the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Why are we even solving this problem? Encouraging more people in STEM, right? Like they said that they want more women in STEM.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah, that is.
I never wondered. Yeah,
Yeah, so that is part of the issue, right? Because there are gender differences in what people like. So again, if we think about a perfect society that is utopian, where everyone can just choose wherever they want, and we don't care about gender at all, and it was completely equal, and no one was pressuring anyone else, you'd expect the majority of STEM jobs or things dealing with jobs dealing with things we have to be really, really interested in it to be dominated by men who are really, really interested in it. And jobs like things like nursing or psychology, where they're very, very about people, to be dominated by women, which is also what we see. We see generally women, like therapy
also
is
yeah,
tons of
nannies,
women.
OnlyFans, stuff like that,
Yeah. I mean, I
right?
feel like OnlyFans is not the same thing here. That's a different.
Yeah,
That is not because of female preference. I don't think. That's a
yeah.
different.
It's more of like the value and like whatever. I guess yeah. Never mind.
Yeah.
That's a completely different thing.
I guess I want to talk about potential solutions to the overall issues that we see. I suppose first with like dating and relationships and all of that. Like, so because with dating relationships, I feel like there's sometimes people push for really bad solutions. Things like maybe trying to say that it's all women's fault that men are kind of suffering, and it's all they have too high of standards or whatever, which is like not so much on them. We've talked about like the psychological effects of dating apps and choice and stuff, where it's not them just being like entitled. That's not the whole thing. And so I don't think the solution of like just demanding women like have lower standards is something that would ever work, because why would women agree to that? That's not no one wants to just lower their standards.
Yeah.
And if you just go to demand that, that's never going to work. And is also ignores the fact that a lot of it's based on like the problems with our society with technology and stuff. So I want to know, like, do you have any ideas of potential solutions in the realm of...
I actually have a bunch.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's hear it, because I have like one potentially good solution that's like, hey, maybe we could do this, and other than that, I don't know, you're screwed, I guess. So yeah, tell me.
The thing is, all of these actually comes from values and I guess teachings given to us by like cultural values and stuff, at least like from the Indian side.
Uh-huh.
You might have heard like people have done arranged marriages for a long time, right?
Yeah, you know what, actually, yeah, I've looked into a little bit of...
That does teach us a bunch of things. So one thing is, I always wondered like what when my parents ever asked me to do an arranged marriage or anything like that, right? Like I'm growing up here, I have the same mindset as I guess most of you about this thing. But at least I have the opportunity to ask questions to actual people who have gone through arranged marriages. My parents have been in an arranged marriage, and they are some of the happiest people I know. And it's a weird thing because like my all the values I get are from them. My mom is very progressive, but very modest and conservative at the same time, which is a weird mix. And that's what like fuels my values towards, as I said, like all the discussions that we've had today, like relationship, maybe abortion, stuff like that. Because I've also asked her and I've listened to her values. The solution to this one, people are forgetting to adjust with each other. Like they have all these expectations and stuff. The biggest thing we are taught as kids, or I guess as in our culture, is the you have to become compassionate. You have to become adjusting to the partner, because like when arranged marriages happened, you didn't know the other person for a long time. Like even with like lots of marriages nowadays, maybe it's not as common right now, where you date somebody for like 7 years, 6 years. But the anomalies, right? The anomalies where you date somebody for 2 months, 3 months, and you just like, match up with them. The reason, the way arranged marriages work is they try to look for the friction points, which they try to smooth out most of the friction points. So when they look for compatibility, they try to look for like preferences. First of all, like both parties' preference. Like does the girl like the appearance? First of all, does the girl have like everything that she wanted in a man? Like maybe she wanted somebody who was like a technologist guy, or maybe she wanted somebody who was a handyman. All of these things are looked upon initially. Then comes like the social status. Like, do you have a job? Are you like well-to-do? Do you have values? Then comes like the personal values and the family values. So the parents kind of get involved. They look through like family values and stuff. They smoothen out all these friction points. Then you get into the marriage. So initially, when you don't have all these issues that you have to work through, because like if you're doing a marriage by yourself, like here, all of these you have to figure out as a man or as a woman by yourself. Those things are reduced. Now, the point I was trying to get at is the adjustment factor is a big one, because most of the issues here happen is because, hey, you didn't do something my way, or I didn't do something your way. We are not compatible. All of a sudden, like we're not compatible. We got into this big fight. Now we want a divorce. You don't like my parents. We want a divorce. Nobody is trying to be compassionate towards the other party, because like the other party is there with you for the whole life. Like if you make a commitment for life initially, then you can work towards the thing. Then you can work towards like, working out all the problems, being their friend, stuff like that. So I guess one solution that at least I would have in my head when I go through like these things is a few fundamental things, like never compromise your, because like culture, I definitely feel that culture is a big influence of society, because if you raise good kids, if you raise people with morale, they're going to grow up to be like good people. So to foster an environment where, they have like somebody in the family, they don't have to like, the kids don't have to go through like fights and divorces all the time. That's my responsibility, I guess, as a parent or as a husband to my wife. So I'll have to foster that all the time. And the same thing has I would hope the same thing goes for the wife as well, because like she should also understand that her right to parties is not triumphed by the other values that come first. They have to first care about the people in their life. They have to care about their kids. They have to care about like their husbands, their families, and stuff like that. Once that, because that's like a change of mindset. First, you have that change of mindset. That's what reduces all these frictions. Because like people right now have this mentality of like, I want to do what I want to do, and if you don't fit my world, then my world is my world. It's really, I think, narcissism.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I absolutely agree. I agree with a lot of that. I think that like relationships generally are built on like compromise of like
Yeah,
trying to like build something that's beneficial to both people, and the kind of idea of like I want I want everything to happen exactly my way, and if it doesn't, I'm not going to participate. I think is something that makes it hard to actually create good marriages or
yeah.
good
And I
relationships.
guess it'll be better if you just like discuss some of these things out beforehand anyway. Like it's just good to have like good to know what you want in a relationship, be well versed in like what makes a good marriage, and then move ahead with that.
Yeah, and I think to put your to go back to your previous point, you briefly mentioned anecdotally that your parents had one of the most loving relationships that you've seen. So I've actually done a little bit of research on this, and from the studies I could find, which albeit somewhat limited, but there are a couple studies on it that generally seem that in arranged marriages, at first the amount of like love and connectedness seems to be lower right at the start, obviously because you didn't know the person or anything, but over time generally seems to increase, and they generally seem to become as happy as what you would refer to as like choice marriages or marriages of like
Hmm.
passion. So that the data does also seem to support your that
Yeah.
idea that they
And
are.
that's the thing. Like it first starts with like just acquaintanceship, and then comes the respect, and then comes love. So that's generally the path that arranged marriages take instead of like the other way. And I'm assuming like even the traditional or I guess normal marriages, like love marriages, also do the same thing, but it's just like less, I guess, planned out. It's more, I guess, up. I'm losing the word, but like it just happens like
Yeah,
naturally.
you
And
just hope it
sometimes it
works
doesn't
out.
happen.
Yeah,
Yeah, you hope it works out. Like if it
it's sort
naturally
of like free
happens, because like
flowing.
if you're going into the relationship, you start respecting your partner, then you start loving them, stuff like that. Uh, but the thing is, arranged marriages at least like guarantee that it happens, that whole path is taken. In case it's not taken, you have more chances of like having issues with your partner and stuff, because you stop respecting them, and then you stop like appreciating what you have. You start looking at other places where you might find better options. Those
Yeah,
kinds of things.
yeah, and I think that's I think that goes kind of to the core of what I think of as with like love and relationships, because it really does feel that like I feel like the love is something that's like created, not something that's like found or happens.
Yeah,
Like I
it's
think,
created definitely.
yeah, so that I think that, so I think arranged marriages do play on that. The big point that I would have with arranged marriage stuff, and why I wouldn't like why I don't consider it in like the possible good solutions category, is just that acceptance is going to be super low. I think most people, well, it's the problem of once you have the choice, even if it makes you less happy, because I guess it is really the choice situation, right? It's the having multiple like whatever jars of whatever jelly and choosing. It's once you have all the choices, even if it makes you less happy, you don't want to go back to having the less choices, even if you'd overall live a much better life with it. So is your idea just to like try to extract some like lessons from it and somehow
I guess a bit of like more cultural ethics comes into play. That's where different cultures call it different things. Like greed, sin, stuff like that. I mean, that's I think that's what you have to rely on once you're in a committed relationship, because like you'll always find pretty people around you. You know, you'll always like there will always be options, but like that's what your commitment is, what gives you value as a person. That's what makes you valuable. Because like if my partner is not committed, then why am I in this relationship? Or if I'm not committed, then why should they be with me? Like I'm not saying that it's always has to be the other person. Like I put just as many restrictions on myself.
yeah.
That's the thing. Because like having jars, like the feeling of like seeing jars around you is always gonna be present. But like it would be your choice to not be tempted. Or even if you're tempted, it would be your choice to like understand that hey, there's more things to life than just like, attraction. Because like as I said, there's like more values. There's like family values. There's like you have children, or you have like a house, or you have everything that's going on around you.
So how would you?
You can't break all of that up. Like, yeah.
So I want to know, how would you incorporate this into like, I don't know, modern society? Like, so because this seems like a nice thing, but the problem is like you can't just say like, well, everyone should just be like nicer to each other and like live happier lives. Because like how would you practically
I think it is probably going to be a long road, because in short term, they have to, because like the only way humans respond to things is by profit and loss, or benefits and gains, right? Like if they are in the harm's way, they would avoid doing that. You would not touch fire because you know you're gonna get burnt. If people realize how much, because like a bunch of things that I'm noticing nowadays is the thing is, I think I have more traditional values, and I think maybe having families and something is a good thing. Maybe some people can like live without it, but in general, I think people would appreciate having families, appreciate having kids, in majority. Um, and when they start seeing like the when they get their eyes open to all the harms that like modern practices do, like modern, like I guess hookup cultures and everything does to like their long-term vision, or their long-term like family life, that's when they would be, I guess, tempted to hold back, I guess. Because like in the name of freedom, you can do anything you want, like the only thing that, as I said, like these restrictions, these things from the past were put in place because they appreciated some of these like cultural values.
So yeah, you think maybe just sitting back and kind of waiting for
Actively teaching your own kids, actively like
Okay,
showing
yeah.
them, showing like other people around. And it's a long road, because like Western values are, they change like so often. Like you see like how the values were in 80s, 90s. People are definitely opening up to like these new ideas. People are definitely opening up to like seeing how some things might harm you. Like before, smoke and tobacco was all the time. Hey, now it's harming your health, move on. Then like some practices are harming your mental health, move on. Now if it's harming your social kind of like well-being, move on. Like learn as you go along, and try to learn from like other cultures. Maybe like pick up things from like other places that somebody's been doing well. Maybe if somebody in the Europe is doing better, pick that up. Like be open to learning, not just be like open. Because I think one big thing is in both sides, like far right, far left, uh extremism always like shuts down conversations. It
Yeah.
always does. um I guess it becomes controversial again, but like when I bring up abortion, I see both sides. Far right would be like not at all, and far left would be like complete openness. That's why I'm like, hey, work with everybody, like listen why somebody would want to have abortion, like work through that, and create a proper solution for that one. And with any issues, honestly.
Ah, yeah, so you said you had a lot of do you have any other potential solutions going around in that head of yours?
Wait, regarding what though? Like the
Um,
same thing?
Actually, yeah, I guess it's the same. We're on the same topic of relationships right now, and then we'll move on to economic stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess all of this just changes by the definition of relationships. If everybody wants to have like individual things, hookup culture should be like a long term thing. Then maybe none of what I said is probably gonna work anywhere. But then if people, if I don't know if the
I
data suggests that people are happier when they're like in committed relationships, or if they're happier when they're content.
it does it does. Yep, people are
See,
happier and yeah.
contentment, yeah, like you should never jeopardize the contentment in your life. Like sure, like you're having like these quick hookups, but then what next?
Yeah, yeah, and I think I think that there are a lot of people who do want actual like relationships. I think that the part of the problem with like the hookup culture and stuff is that it's kind of almost taken people by force to an extent. But yeah, we'll see where
And
that
yeah,
goes.
the options are just available. As I said, like options are available. It's on you to like be faithful, be loyal.
So one option I was thinking of that could potentially try to push back against it is maybe a modern form of like almost like in-person like speed dating, because that used to be a thing, and I think you could potentially modify that to I thought about maybe trying to run this type of experiment where like you do something where you get a limited number of people and you show them with another limited number of people, and you have them like mingle and try to date within that pool, because then you kind of restrict yourself from like all the other like things on social media and stuff to like actual real people in your environment that are likely going to be similar in like situation to you, and you'd have to kind of slightly pre-select for it, but like let's say like people at like university or something, and then try to run that. And if it works, you'd have to try to see, maybe look at what the data shows on actual like what actually makes happy relationships. So like warmth and trustworthiness, I think, is one of the kind of traits that actually predicts long-term happiness in a relationship. So try to find a way to like actually maximize for whatever things actually make people compatible and make relationships good, while adding as much of the things that people are like innately evolutionary attracted to as needed to ensure that relationship actually gets off the ground. Try to see if that works. And if it does, I think you might be able to expand the solution to a some mobile application, where the initial connecting with people has to be done over like video call, essentially. So like a kind of almost speed dating, except it's in an app. So it's a much easier to be accessible, and then you just artificially limit the number of like people you can see, right? So like you can't just endlessly like swipe. You can meet with like maybe whatever, like.
Isn't that how Tinder works right now? Maybe its purpose is different now, because like Tinder is actively promoting the hookup culture, but still though, right?
As far as I know, Tinder has always been hookup culture. That is always what Tinder has been. Is
But like they still geographically what do you call that? Filter out people.
Geographically?
Yeah.
Oh,
no?
Yeah. So it does filter people based on in your area. That does. So what I was talking about was filtering with people that was more of like status, like socioeconomic status and stuff. So like,
Okay.
because like, what might not work well is if you have like a very poor like guy and like more wealthy like college educated like university educated woman, you speed date match them, like they might not be compatible just because their innate like desires for a match would be different. There also might be in very different places in life. So like in the actual like in-person speed dating thing, you might want to like select for people who are at similar points in their life or at similar like situations, so they have a little bit more in common and more likely to match.
What I'm wondering is though, aren't like some relationship, it still like leaves out people where they're not equal? Because I'm assuming there are a fair bit of relationships where somebody was university graduate and somebody wasn't. Maybe more often than not, it's the guy who's like actually well off, and then the woman is.
Yeah, you're right. So maybe
she probably has a trade. She probably has like some education, but not the same amount, same level.
Yeah, so you'd have to do something there. You're right, because yeah, like women generally would want the disparity there. They want the difference in like that. That's where the desire is, right? So you'd have to find a way to do that to
Maybe in that case, that's not your target user base.
Yeah, well, you know what?
But it does account for like a majority of population, so it kind of works.
Well, I think you can do that, because like I think a lot of people are going to want that. I think you can do that to an extent. But I think a lot of relationships, though, there is definitely the wanting the guy to be higher in socioeconomic status, but a lot of other things that make relationships work generally tend to be similarities and stuff. So like, women generally want like higher socioeconomic men. The data seems like usually relationships happen within classes. So like lower class people generally date and stuff with lower class people, and it won't.
So will your app allow you to have those preferences? Hey, maybe I want this class person or this kind of height or weight and stuff like that.
Well,
like
that's interesting.
Those are initial preferences.
Preferably, what you do is you get all that data, you get as much data as you can about the people, and then match them on statistically what would make them the best, most compatible matches. So like you just look at the data and see how big of a disparity, right? Because there's also disparities like men like women like older men like younger women. But there's a range there, right? Where it's like if it's like a 20-year difference, it's probably not gonna like work out. So I think it's I think it would just be I haven't like fully planned all this out, but I think it would just be like looking and seeing what does the data show makes people compatible, makes people desirable. Actually,
I'm smiling because this really does sound like an arranged marriage system. Because that's how it starts.
So
that's like you show each other the profiles.
That's
the guy or the girl like likes each other, and then it works ahead.
You're I think you're 100% right. What this essentially is doing is trying to replicate all the benefits that arranged marriage gets, but within a system that isn't exactly arranged marriage in the way that it's not. Because it's still obviously voluntary and people can do it if they want. So it's like an opt-in arranged marriage system that doesn't come with any of the negative connotations of an arranged marriage system.
I mean, arranged marriage has been opt-in for like last 100 years at least. 100 years.
Oh yeah, I guess I'm not very well educated in that. That's interesting actually.
Maybe this one is just more like modernized version because like it's more online at this point. Yeah.
Oh, but actually, yeah. Then essentially, that would be the idea of like using technology to arrange a ideal partnership, and I think that's one way that you could eliminate it, and try to eliminate the problems that might come with a lot of the other like all of their social media apps, like dating apps or other things just like Instagram and stuff, where it's showing you constantly other people and stuff, will still be there and there'll still be the pressure. But hopefully, if you can kind of contain the actual dating and desirability in like a box, hopefully you can actually get people to like match with people they are compatible with and would have like a actual desirable long-term relationship with.
That makes sense.
So moving from that, then the final thing would then be, how do you deal with the economic situation, right? Because you have a lot of people wanting women to be achieving economically equally to men, right? And I don't think it's really ethical to just use discrimination to try to throw them there, because in most cases men are probably going to outperform women just because they're willing to work harder. And so if you just baseline equalize it, then you have men who are suffering all the negative impacts of taking on the extra risk and like failing, or all those negative externalities of like having to do stuff. Well, you're just granting it to women by default, like a lot of other things, which is obviously not fair or ethical, and just puts men in a worse place generally. And I guess would also make relationships harder. So I don't think that's really a good option. And then you have the option of like putting the same burden on women that is put on men to perform, right? Because like to an extent, there is some biological components where this is built in. It might be a little bit harder, but I think if you restricted a lot of women's ability to have any kind of intimate relationship with friends or partners, unless they achieved high economic status, or if you went down a more brutalist route of, I guess, full equality, of not just equalizing economic outcomes, but also equalizing the negative outcomes of the society. So like suicide rates and stuff, like like equalizing those to the extent where you kill off anyone who is performing low economically, encouraging people to perform higher economically, and by statistics speaking, you're just removing the lowest percentage of people out of the pool, so on average everyone else is performing higher, would also increase the numbers, I imagine. But also is a terrible solution, obviously. And I don't think that would really work, because
I think America used to do that a while ago, didn't they?
What do you mean by that? Because part of that, they definitely.
They used to do this thing where certain people had to be sterilized if they were prisoners, or if they were mentally challenged, stuff like that.
That sounds crazy, and like exactly
the euthanization project or something.
That sounds crazy, and the exact type of thing the U.S. would do. Yeah, you know what? I imagine. I don't know at all if that's true, but it definitely sounds like something the U.S. would do, right? Like
no, I think they actually did that. I learned it in one of human geography classes. I can't remember. Like one of the courses actually taught us that.
Yeah, they did a lot of messed up stuff and like experimentation on people and stuff. Yeah, like with the Tuskegee Institute shit. Yeah, it's U.S. has a long history of actually doing bad stuff like that. Yeah, so maybe they did do not exactly what I'm describing, but other fucked up shit. Yeah, so but I don't think that like actually you doing that like forcing all the negative costs that men pay as like a gender for their success onto women in an encouragement to achieve economic performance. Well, that would actually I think equalize the performance to a great deal. I don't think it's really an ethical solution, nor one that anyone would really want, because no one really wants women to bear the same costs as men. I don't think that's a desirable solution in the eyes of men or women. So I want to know if you have any good solutions for this of like I guess
This one is quite challenging, yeah.
because
Wait, before the options, can you go back to the main question
the
sentence?
problem the main problem is that men do perform economically much better than women, right? They way more of the CEOs and everyone are men than women, and a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people think that it should be more equal, that men and women should perform the same amount. How do you actually deal with this? Because we have a lot of people pushing very hard for this
Hmm.
to equalize. And historically, there have been some restrictions on like women that I think not largely have been lifted now, but historically keeping women out of the workplace and stuff.
I guess it's certainly, yeah, because like personalities differ and then preferences differ. That really does create barriers. And nobody's gonna get rid of any of those things.
I think
If we
another
really do want to equalize them, actually, um, I feel like this just propagates the same society further than,
yeah equalizing it. You mean?
yeah, does equalizing,
Yeah, I mean,
hmm.
I feel like I don't know if there's any ethical way to equalize it when the people are different and the desires are different. When the people in the society want it some way, biologically, that's the way that it's pointing. Like, I don't think that arbitrarily equalizing it actually helps.
Yeah, I was gonna say because like I was trying to refrain from saying this, but then equalizing this more and more will just propagate this culture where men don't like women, women don't like, or women have these high preferences. They have more and more nuclear families, and in general, the opposite of what created contentment. In a way, because like
Yeah,
I don't, I highly doubt that it's gonna be like at a mass scale, because like most women are still going to opt for like average to normal, like me, I guess
yeah,
average sized high income things. Not they're probably not going to aim for all the top, or even if
yeah,
whoever
yeah,
aims for the top, they're still going to be like a small number.
yeah, yeah. I think that's
um
fair.
but the push to like teach them, because like it inherently creates expectations. Like little children, little girls will like see that as an accom or as motivational thing, and they will try to achieve the same thing, which will in turn, I guess, keep propagating this whole thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, like an
Maybe
achievement.
we can work for a solution where equality comes in opportunity. Isn't we can probably like fine tune more places where like minor biases are at least removed. Because I'm assuming like
Yeah,
at a major scale, even if there is nothing, there is definitely biases here and there,
yeah. I'm
which
saying.
account for all these like experiences to women.
Yeah, and I think
Removing, yeah, removing those would be a thing. But then I also feel like the discussion we had was quite valuable, and I want like some of the I would hope that some of the loud Protestant sides would listen to some of these things
yeah.
and work with reality than to just like work for a narrative, because any side working for a narrative is never going to reach a solution or equitable or fair solution. They're going to reach for their solution, sure, but it's not going to be a fair one.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. Because I think a lot of just like having honest conversations about like valuing all positions. Because I do think that there's currently, because there hasn't been a lot of like historically there have been some restrictions against women entering the workforce and stuff. Now that they're lifted, now it's going far the other way of like every woman should be that, and not really
Yeah,
valuing the women who choose other options. So I think being honest about like the situation everyone is in and valuing the choices people make more on like what makes them happy and what fulfills them in life, and less on like more I don't know societal.
yeah, I kind of agree. I definitely agree with this one where I'm seeing this trend where the people who want to stay at home, or the people who don't want to choose the path of this working and being like a boss bitch kind of thing, they're definitely being looked down upon. And some people might not want to agree on that, but I think I've seen that happen at least. So like, yeah, chill out on all sides, basically.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Oh, one other
Yeah.
bad solution that I feel like in addition to like acknowledging all like the true things that like underline a lot of the more like crazy talking points of the various sides, I also think it's important to like counteract a lot of the more outlandish conclusions and problematic conclusions. And so the last thing I think I'll just point out is I feel like sometimes what can then be argued is because a lot of the male economic performance is pushed by female preference. I think a lot of, and we touched on a little bit earlier about like just having desirable relationships, but like sometimes what can happen is the arguing that like, well, if women want men to perform economically equal or less than them, what they would need to just do is choose men who perform equally or less than them economically and not choose ones higher, and just through their preferences would then just change men's behavior and would change the landscape. And I think that would obviously that would I think to a large extent actually work, right? Like I think that if women somehow all convinced each other to stop dating men who were successful and instead exclusively go for the people who were like losers living like in their parents' basement, not like doing anything, just like sitting at home playing video games all day, then a lot more guys would decide to not like go and achieve high and instead be losers, and then women would outperform them by a rather massive margin. I think things would flip, but I don't think it's a good solution because you're demanding a like change in like the core preferences that women have for partners. It would be like arguing that like the solution to like male loneliness being that you should just date super old or super like obese women because that's the
Yeah,
and
that's the opposite one. I was gonna say.
yeah, exactly, right. And so like, and you say that to any men, and no men's gonna ever accept that because those people are completely undesirable, right? But when it goes to the reverse, I think sometimes people are a lot more quick to be like, oh well, it's all women's fault anyway, and by choosing the higher value partners, they are I don't know, but by not choosing the lower economic partners, they are, I don't know how to word it.
I mean, their preferences are justified.
Yeah, their preferences. Yeah, I think that their preferences are justified, and demanding change in them
Yeah.
isn't fair either. I think it
Yeah, so
isn't
like
fair
demanding change, yeah, definitely.
it
That was
isn't
the
fair to
first thing, yeah,
dismiss
right?
them. I guess is the
Yeah.
dismiss them because of their preferences is what I would say. But yeah, I think that's a lot of the points I wanted to talk about. Yeah, do you have anything else before we wrap it up of like any other issues that men might face that we haven't touched on?
Uh Maybe I don't know if it's an issue. It might result in some issues, but like this one thing where at least I've seen this trend happen where if a woman is actually achieving for success, she's actually doing it for herself. But if a man is achieving success, he's only partly doing it for himself, partly.
Yes.
Maybe he is doing it for himself, like mostly, but there's still a small factor where he wants the society to work with him, and he wants to be, socially higher, every benefit that comes with it, like be it relationships, be it like, respect, ego, all of that kind of that comes with it.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
that is. I think that's an issue that I guess maybe we didn't put the nail in of the fact that like generally women are valued a lot more for their like physicality because that's what men value in them, and in society are also kind of just viewed as almost like innately valuable and innately like desirable, not just from a like romantic partner relationship, but also just as like human beings. They are kind of almost innately valued. They have value by being a woman, whereas men that's not the case. Men are generally considered like innately valueless. I mentioned expendable, which generally seems to be a trend historically, and they have to build that value through the working and stuff. So yeah, I think that so I think that there is a little bit of that of additionally what men are doing when they achieve economic success is building the value in themselves that they didn't have before, that they do have to go through that process of building it. And partly what they might be doing it for is for a potential partner to provide for other people. I would say that that's not always the case, though. I can imagine there being men who are doing it for like less noble reasons. They're not doing it to like provide for a partner necessarily. They're doing it because that's what's required, maybe.
I mean, yeah, people's personalities are different.
Yeah.
Some people value ego, or some people value like their social status a lot more, so they kind of like chase after that. So
yeah, I would say that just men aren't all noble for achieving economic success is what I would say there. To be fair to
I guess just an acknowledging point in men's
opposition.
issues is that, yeah, the acknowledging option is that it's not just like men having issues when the society is changing, or the women's activism is changing. It's also when like the elitist men themselves are like taking advantage of everybody that's lower down.
Yeah, that is a thing of, because like the concept of patriarchy is kind of interesting, because it's not men helping men. It's some men at the top screwing over everyone else. It's never it's not men working together. It's men fighting against each other, and some of them win and then beat down everyone else. Is kind of
Yeah.
the way it unfortunately works.
And I guess the I think elitist mindset is rampant in like any gender. So when the patriarchy was being fought against, I think in the women's suffrage movement, I think there was like this small portion that sprung up that was just like elitist women only working or wanting rights for the higher socioeconomic or higher status women, not for the immigrant women, not for like the other women, which I guess wasn't like a common thing, but it was like a very small proportion. That kind of goes to show like in society all of these kinds of things, men, women, all of these things, there will always be like this one small factor, but you shouldn't like generalize them. We didn't generalize them for like the whole women's suffrage movement, so maybe on the patriarchy side, not all men should be generalized for the whatever like the current situation is.
I think I kind of get where you're coming from. I mean, it is a very small number of the elite men at the top as well. Like most men also aren't achieving that high. Most men are not having that success that you see online. Most men are far below that and are kind of invisible to the statistics in like common what do you call it, media, I guess. But yeah, I think that was a fairly good conversation on the topic. We touched on a lot of points. I might have to do another one of these later if I find out I've missed a bunch of stuff. But it's generally.
I found like your points really structured, because like you were introducing something initially, and then you were like looping it back, and like it was quite well done.
Yeah, I did a lot of research on this topic. I did a lot of I have read in the past like month more scientific papers than I have read in the rest of my life, just on gender dynamics of like what people want and stuff. Because when you're making these claims, you want to make sure that it's very scientific based, right? Like it's there's evidence to back up what you're saying. You're not just saying, oh, men are like this or women like this, without actual science behind you to say it, right?
What was your motivation? Like, are you just fed up with all the one-sided information that's going on from either side?
Yeah, part of it is that. Yeah, I do feel like I don't like how there's two sides that neither really get at the point and are both kind of being dishonest and not having conversations with each other. I also like having some hard conversations. I like talking about things that other people are unwilling to talk about and actually bring stuff to the forefront. That was the whole idea of the podcast, kind of. But yeah, it is something that like I have faced, and like I feel like a lot of people aren't confident enough, aren't brave enough to actually bring up a lot of these topics, aren't brave enough to say these things. So I feel like if I can do it, I have some obligation to actually try to improve it then. I would thank you for coming out and actually having this conversation with me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This was a great conversation. And I hope I touched some points, and I hope I didn't touch a nerve. I really did not mean to do that in case I did. So I guess to anybody who's thinking
this is called Defense of the Indefensible. The whole point is talking about things that are hard to talk about and might touch nerves. It's a space to do that. But, yeah, it was nice.